Welcome to Sci-Fi Alien, the channel where the boundaries of the universe unfold in the most thrilling ways imaginable. Have you ever wondered what would happen if humanity encountered creatures far beyond our understanding, with powers that could change the course of history? Imagine a race of ancient beings, once thought extinct, suddenly returning to reclaim their place in the galaxy. What do they want? And what happens when their awakening triggers a conflict that could either unite or destroy everything we know? Stay tuned, because this story is about to take you to the edge of your imagination, where the impossible becomes real. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where the stars barely touched the cold surface of a forgotten mining planet, Kaelara sat alone in the dim glow of harsh, artificial light. The chains that bound her were more than just physical restraints, they symbolized the endless years of captivity, the centuries of solitude that had reduced her to a mere specimen, something to be studied, exploited, and feared. To the world, Kaelara was nothing more than a monster, a titan of immeasurable size, standing over 30 feet tall, her violet skin shimmering like a forgotten star in the night sky. Her kind, the Titans, once ruled the stars. Their race had been a symbol of unmatched power, their technology far superior to anything the galaxy had ever seen. But now, after wars and betrayals, the Titans were no more. All that remained were Kaelara and the myths of her people, lost in time. She had become a relic, locked away in the heart of a mining colony, hidden from the universe that had once worshipped her kind. When Commander Elias Carter was assigned to oversee the operations on Nexus 9, the last thing he expected to find was Kaelara, imprisoned in a cage, shackled by energy chains. His first impression, like many others who had seen her, was fear. A Titan, bound in chains, was a symbol of power and helplessness in the same breath. But Elias was different. There was something in Kaelara's eyes, a faint glimmer of intelligence and an unspoken plea that spoke to him in a way nothing else had. She wasn't just a giant, a monster. She was a being, trapped and misunderstood. Elias stepped closer, his boots clicking softly against the cold floor. The guards around her stood at a distance, watching him with wary eyes, ready to intervene if necessary. But Elias ignored them, his focus solely on the Titan before him. "What are you staring at?" Kaelara's voice was deep, like thunder rumbling from far away, but it carried a quiet sadness that almost broke through the walls of her imposing frame. She looked down at him, her massive eyes narrowed, not out of malice, but something more profound, loneliness. "Do you see a monster?" she asked, her voice heavy with weariness. Elias stood still for a moment, feeling the weight of her gaze. Most would have backed away, or at least treated her with suspicion. But not him. Elias had always been the type to see beneath the surface. He'd spent his life in the military, facing dangers beyond the scope of most humans, and yet here, standing before him, was a creature who had lived through countless horrors. She was no monster. She was a survivor. "No," Elias said softly, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "I don't see a monster. I see a prisoner." Her eyes flickered, a flicker of something, surprise, maybe hope, passed through them. But before she could respond, Elias turned his head toward the guards. "Remove her chains," he commanded, his tone firm. The guards hesitated. "Commander," one of them spoke, his voice uncertain, "are you sure that's wise?" She's not a threat," Elias cut him off, his eyes locking onto theirs. "She's been a prisoner for too long. You don't chain a living being like this." Reluctantly, the guards complied, and the sound of Kaelara's chains clinking as they were released filled the air. She stood slowly, stretching her limbs, her massive frame towering over Elias. There was a softness in her movements that didn't match the intimidating form she bore. She wasn't a monster. She was a warrior who had been broken. For a moment, they simply stood there, Elias and Kaelara, two beings from vastly different worlds, gazing at each other. It was a strange kind of silence, not the kind of awkward silence filled with tension, but one that seemed to stretch out in understanding. "You don't fear me?" Kaelara asked, her voice quieter now, more curious than defensive. "No," Elias replied, stepping closer. I think you've been through enough fear. You don't need any more." Kaelara tilted her head slightly, as though considering his words. "You are different from the others," she said. "They look at me with fear. They see a monster. But you look at me with, what is that? Pity? Or something else?" Elias shook his head. "No, I don't pity you, Kaelara. I see you. I see the suffering, the strength, the soul behind those eyes. And I think you deserve to be free." She looked at him, her gaze softening. "I've been alone for so long. My people, my race, gone. And now, I am nothing but a relic. What is freedom to me?" Elias stepped forward, his hand reaching out in an almost unconscious gesture. "Freedom is having the choice. The choice to live, to fight, to rebuild. You're not a relic, Kaelara. You are a survivor. And you matter." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "What if I am too broken? What if I've lost everything that made me who I was?" Elias met her eyes with a quiet determination. "You're not broken. You've just been hidden away. I can't promise that the past won't haunt you, but I can promise that I will help you find a way forward. You are more than the chains that bound you. You are more than the mistakes of the past. And together, we can change the future." For the first time since they met, Kaelara smiled, a smile that was small but genuine, filled with a quiet gratitude. "You believe in me?" Elias nodded. "I believe in you." They stood there for a moment longer, as the weight of their shared understanding settled between them. And for Kaelara, it was as though something deep within her began to stir, hope, long buried beneath the years of her captivity, now slowly rising. And in Elias, she found something unexpected, something she had long thought lost, a kindred spirit. In that instant, the two of them, one human, one titan, found in each other the strength to begin something new. A journey that would not just change their lives, but change the galaxy itself. Together, they would defy the odds, face the shadows of the past, and forge a future that no one had ever dreamed possible. A future where love, understanding, and true strength would rewrite the destiny of their worlds. And so, it began. The days after Kaelara's chains were removed felt different. There was a strange kind of quiet between her and Elias, but not the kind that filled the air with discomfort. It was a silent understanding, a space where words weren't always necessary. Kaelara had been freed from her shackles, but her soul was still bound by the weight of her past. Every time she gazed up at the stars, every time she spoke of her people, it was clear that she was still trapped in the shadow of their loss. One evening, as the cold of the alien night settled around them, Elias found Kaelara sitting alone, her massive form silhouetted against the flickering light of the campfire. She stared at the stars, her eyes distant, lost in thoughts that he could only imagine. The silence between them felt heavy, like something unsaid was pressing against them both. He approached her cautiously, not wanting to disturb the quiet moment, but knowing that the distance between them had grown. Despite the connection they had built, Kaelara was still a prisoner in her mind. Her past haunted her, and he knew that it wasn't enough to just free her body. She needed to free her heart, too. "What are you thinking about?" Elias asked softly, his voice cutting through the silence. Kaelara turned her head, her luminous eyes locking onto his. There was no hostility in her gaze, just the remnants of something lost, something that only time could heal. She let out a long, heavy sigh. "My people," she said, her voice low and filled with sorrow. "The Titans. We once ruled the stars. We built worlds, created marvels beyond anything your species could dream. But now, all that's left is me, and the ruins of our greatness. I used to believe that our power was unshakable. That we were eternal. But now," she paused, a shadow of pain crossing her features. "Now I am the last. The last of a civilization that was lost." Elias sat down beside her, his gaze following the stars above. He didn't speak at first, he simply listened. He had come to understand that Kaelara wasn't just mourning the fall of her people. She was mourning the death of everything she had once believed in, the certainty that their civilization was unstoppable, that they were destined to be the ones to shape the galaxy. And now, it was all gone, reduced to ashes. "Kaelara," Elias finally spoke, his voice gentle but resolute, "you're not alone. You have me." She shook her head, a bitter smile playing on her lips. "That's not enough, Elias. I've lost everything. My people are gone, my legacy is shattered. What am I without them?" His heart ached at the question, but he didn't turn away. Instead, he placed a hand on her arm, small and insignificant against her massive form, but a symbol of the support he was offering. "What are you?" "You're Kaelara. The last Titan, yes, but not just the last. You're the beginning of something new. You've lived through the end of one era. Now it's time to rebuild." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of disbelief and something else, hope. But it was faint, like a distant star flickering in the dark. "How do you rebuild when there's nothing left to rebuild?" Kaelara whispered. "How do I lead when everything I once believed in is gone?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, his mind racing for the right words. He had never faced anything like this, never had to deal with the weight of an entire civilization's collapse. But one thing he did know was that Kaelara wasn't the only one who had lost something. He had seen the horrors of war, the destruction that men and nations inflicted on each other. But he had also seen the incredible resilience of those who refused to give up, who found strength in the most unlikely places. "You're not rebuilding the past, Kaelara," Elias said finally. "You're building something new. A new legacy. You're the key to bringing your people back, not in the form they once were, but something better. The Titans were more than just warriors, weren't they? They were creators. They built. And you can still do that. You have the strength, the wisdom, and the heart to rebuild, not for the past, but for the future." Kaelara turned her eyes back to the stars, her thoughts drifting to a time long gone. She had spent so many years alone, trying to hold onto a past that was slipping through her fingers. For so long, she had believed that the fall of her people had meant the end of everything. But now, Elias was asking her to look ahead, to build a future from the ruins. It was a thought that terrified her. "What if I can't?" she asked quietly. "What if I'm just not enough?" Elias shifted closer, his hand still on her arm. "You are enough. You're everything your people stood for. You've already proven that. You survived, Kaelara. You survived the destruction. You survived the loss. And now, you have the chance to help others survive, too. Her eyes met his again, and this time, there was a flicker of something stronger than doubt, determination. And what about you? Why do you believe in me so much? Elias smiled softly, the warmth in his eyes cutting through the distance between them. Because I see you. Not the monster they all feared, not the last of your kind. I see a leader. I see someone who has endured more than most could imagine. And I know that you can do this. We can do this together. The silence that followed wasn't one of sadness or confusion, it was a moment of quiet acceptance. Kaelara looked down at Elias's hand, still resting on her arm. It was so small compared to her own massive form, yet it felt as though it held the world. In that moment, Kaelara realized something she had never allowed herself to feel in years: hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could build something new. Something stronger than what was lost. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe in a future, not one of sorrow, but one of possibilities. I'll try, Kaelara said quietly, her voice filled with a new kind of resolve. I'll try to build again. Elias nodded, his heart swelling with pride. That's all anyone can ever ask of you. As the night deepened and the stars continued to flicker in the endless expanse above them, Kaelara and Elias sat in silence, no longer burdened by the weight of the past. For the first time, Kaelara allowed herself to dream of a future she would create, alongside the human who saw past her size and strength, and into the very heart of who she truly was. As Kaelara's resolve began to take root, so too did the urgency of their mission. The promise Elias had made to her echoed in the quiet moments between them: they would find the answers. She had suffered long enough, imprisoned by chains and haunted by the ghosts of her people. She had been the last Titan, but now, Elias had ignited something in her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in centuries: hope. And hope, even faint, can change the course of destiny. The journey to the Andromeda arm wasn't a simple one. It was a place of legends, a vast, unexplored region of space that had long been abandoned by most, seen as a graveyard of worlds. But to Kaelara, it was more than a final resting place, it was the last chance to reclaim what had been lost. It was a chance to discover the truth of her people's fall, and perhaps, their future. Elias, ever the steady presence, navigated the treacherous route through asteroid fields and warped space. The ship's sensors hummed with activity as they cut through the darkness. Yet even in the vast emptiness of space, there was a subtle shift within Kaelara. She was no longer just a prisoner, she was a warrior again. Her spirit, though still scarred, was beginning to awaken. It's strange, Kaelara said one evening, her voice distant as she stared out of the ship's viewport at the swirling stars. I've never ventured this far before. My people, we always stayed within the boundaries we knew. We were never explorers in the way your species are. Elias glanced over at her, his hands steady on the controls as he adjusted their course. Maybe that's part of the problem. Sometimes, the greatest discoveries are the ones that scare us the most. Kaelara's gaze shifted to him. You've been through much, haven't you? More than I care to remember, he replied, a hint of a smile on his lips. But I've learned that sometimes, the hardest thing is accepting that we can't know everything. We have to trust in the journey. She nodded, the weight of her people's lost knowledge pressing on her shoulders. How do you rebuild a civilization from dust? That question lingered in her mind, unanswered, but Elias's words gave her a small comfort. Maybe the journey itself would bring the answers she sought. When they finally arrived at the coordinates Elias had uncovered, they were met with a world that didn't resemble anything Kaelara had expected. The planet was a wasteland, desolate and covered in layers of ash, its once glorious cities now crumbled into dust. From above, the surface was scattered with debris, ancient ruins, and what looked like remnants of something far older than either of them. The atmosphere was thick with the remnants of past catastrophes, and the temperature was a sharp contrast to the warmth of the sun. Elias set the ship down carefully, the landing gears scraping across the rough ground. The air outside smelled of sulfur and decay, and the landscape stretched out before them like an ancient graveyard. "This is it, isn't it?" Kaelara's voice was quieter now, almost reverent. The weight of her ancestors' history pressed down on her like the gravity of the dying world itself. "This was my people's home." Elias nodded. "Looks like we've got a lot of ground to cover." Together, they suited up in protective gear, stepping out of the ship into the harsh air. The landscape was alien to Kaelara, and yet, it felt oddly familiar, like stepping into a memory half forgotten. She walked slowly, her gaze scanning the ruins that stretched across the planet's surface. "This was the heart of our civilization," Kaelara murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "We built here. Created. This was a city of knowledge, of technology. But now, it's nothing more than ash." Elias's eyes swept over the desolate land, taking in the silent destruction. The silence that hung between them was heavy with unspoken words. What could he say to her? How could he express the weight of loss she had carried for so long? "Tell me about it," Elias asked, his voice steady. "Tell me about the Titans. What was it like?" Kaelara paused, looking out over the remains of her people's once great city. "We were gods among mortals. The galaxies looked to us as protectors, as creators. We mastered the stars, built ships that could bend time itself. We were untouchable." She sighed, her shoulders slumping as she continued. "But power comes at a cost. The Titans were too proud, too sure of our place in the galaxy. We ignored the warnings, turned our backs on those who were weaker. And the day came when the stars themselves turned against us. Our enemies, they came from the darkness. The Consortium, they played a role in our fall, but it was our own arrogance that made us blind to the danger." Elias took a step closer, his voice soft. "And now you're here. The last of them." Kaelara's eyes hardened as she turned to him. "Not the last. The beginning." She moved forward, her gaze scanning the ruins with renewed determination. "The Titans didn't die out. We were sealed away, hidden in the fabric of the universe. The knowledge of our people, our legacy, it's here. If we can find it, we can bring the Titans back. I won't let their fall be in vain." Elias watched her, her resolve strengthening before his eyes. It was clear to him now that Kaelara wasn't just searching for her people's past, she was fighting for their future. There was no longer just a survivor here. This was a leader, a woman who had the strength to rebuild, to rise from the ashes. They ventured deeper into the planet's interior, their footsteps crunching over broken stone. The ruins around them seemed to whisper of ancient greatness and forgotten power, their secrets buried beneath centuries of dust. And then, in the heart of the ruins, they found it. A massive structure, partially intact, its shape more like a pyramid than any of the Titans' known architecture. The walls were covered in intricate symbols, alien to Elias but familiar to Kaelara. She stepped forward, tracing the patterns with her fingers, her eyes widening with recognition. "This is it," she breathed. This is the heart of our civilization. The last library. The final vault. Inside, they found ancient scrolls, some of them still intact, others decayed beyond recognition. But scattered among the rubble were devices that hummed with an unfamiliar energy, dormant but still alive in their own way. Kaelara knelt by one, her hand trembling as she examined the ancient tech. This, she whispered, more to herself than to Elias. This is what we use to communicate across galaxies. To bend the stars to our will. We can restore it? Elias stood behind her, watching as Kaelara's hands glided over the relics of her people. He didn't understand all the details, but he understood one thing: this wasn't just a discovery. This was a rebirth. Kaelara stood up slowly, her expression more resolute than ever. We can bring them back. We can rebuild the Titans. And we will make sure that no one ever sees us as monsters again. As they prepared to leave the ruins, Elias turned to her, a look of quiet pride in his eyes. I don't think the galaxy is ready for what's coming next. Kaelara smiled, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. It's time to show them. After their discovery in the heart of the ancient Titan ruins, Kaelara and Elias stood at the precipice of something extraordinary. The relics they had unearthed were nothing short of miraculous, ancient technology that had been preserved for millennia, awaiting the right hands to wield it. Kaelara, for the first time since their journey began, felt the weight of her destiny shift. The Titans were not simply a lost civilization, they were a people waiting to be reborn, their legacy locked in the very technology that had made them gods among the stars. But there was more to this discovery than ancient relics and powerful weapons. As Kaelara and Elias ventured deeper into the ruins, something more profound began to reveal itself, an unseen presence, a hidden truth, one that Kaelara had not expected to find. The mysterious Titans, the ones who had preserved their legacy, the ones who had sacrificed everything to protect the galaxy, had not been destroyed after all. They were not gone, they were merely hidden, sealed away in a way that no one could have anticipated. The galaxy had assumed they were nothing more than myth. But now, standing in the heart of the ancient Titan chamber, Kaelara could sense it: they were alive, dormant but waiting, much like her people. Elias glanced at her, noticing the change in her demeanor. What is it? He asked, his voice low and cautious. There was something about the atmosphere here, a quiet hum that seemed to resonate through the walls of the chamber. It felt alive, as though the ruins themselves were watching them, waiting. Kaelara's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the surface of a massive stone slab. The markings on it were similar to the ones they had seen before, those strange, cryptic symbols that had once been a part of the Titans' greatest achievements. But these symbols were different. They were moving, shifting in ways that defied logic. This wasn't just a city, Kaelara said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was a sanctuary, a place where my people sealed away their most powerful relics. They didn't die out, Elias. They chose to hide. Elias stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. You mean to say, your people didn't perish? They did this willingly. Kaelara nodded, her heart pounding. We didn't fall to some external force. It wasn't war or destruction. We chose this. We sealed ourselves away to protect the galaxy from what we had become, from what we might become if we were left unchecked. The Titans were once too powerful, too proud. We thought we were invincible. But in the end, we learned the most painful lesson: absolute power corrupts absolutely. The room seemed to shift around them, as though the air itself was reacting to her words. Elias could feel it too, the pulse of energy that resonated through the very stones beneath their feet. There was an unspoken presence here, something that hadn't been active for eons, yet now felt alive again. We were the guardians of a power so immense, so dangerous, that we had to lock it away, Kaelara continued, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. And yet, now I stand here, with the chance to unlock that very power. I don't know if that makes me a savior or a fool. Elias took a step forward, his voice steady. You're not a fool. You're carrying their legacy. What's waiting here, in these ruins, isn't just a weapon. It's a chance to do things differently, to build, not destroy. You're not meant to repeat the mistakes of your past, Kaelara. You're meant to learn from them. Kaelara turned to him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But what if I'm too late? What if the rest of my people, those who sealed themselves away, did so for a reason? What if they never wanted to be found? Elias met her gaze with unwavering certainty. Maybe they didn't want to be found by just anyone. But they wanted you to find them, Kaelara. You're the one who was meant to carry their legacy forward. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. The energy in the room surged, crackling like static. Kaelara stepped back, her instincts sharp as ever, her mind racing. It's starting. The power is being activated. The symbols on the walls shifted again, and this time, they began to glow, casting an ethereal light throughout the chamber. Elias stepped back, his eyes widening as the walls began to part, revealing a hidden doorway that had remained sealed for thousands of years. Beyond it, a vast chamber opened up, filled with statues of titans, giant figures frozen in time, their faces serene yet commanding. At the center of the chamber, however, was something far more shocking. A massive, crystal-like structure stood in the middle of the room, pulsing with energy. It was unlike anything Elias had ever seen before. It radiated a dark beauty, its surface shimmering with ancient runes, some of which Kaelara could recognize. These weren't just decorative markings, they were commands, instructions, written in the ancient Titan language, a language she had long forgotten but was now flooding her mind, unlocking the lost knowledge of her people. That's it, Kaelara whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. That's the heart of the Titan civilization. It's been waiting here all this time, waiting for me. Elias stepped closer, his eyes scanning the room, his pulse quickening. What do you think it is? A weapon? A piece of technology? Kaelara shook her head, her gaze never leaving the crystal structure. It's more than that. It's a living artifact, a key to the very essence of the Titans. It's what we use to control the stars. What we use to bend reality itself. But it's also what brought us to the edge of destruction. For the first time since they had arrived, Elias felt a cold chill creep up his spine. The weight of what Kaelara had just said hung in the air. This wasn't just some forgotten relic, it was a power that had been sealed away for a reason. And now, standing before it, Kaelara had to make a choice: would she unlock it, or would she leave it buried, as her people once had? What are you going to do? Elias asked, his voice steady but his heart racing. Kaelara stood in silence, her fingers brushing against the cool surface of the crystal. I don't know, she admitted. This power, it could be the salvation of my people, or it could be our destruction. But I'm not going to hide from it. I can't. As she stepped forward, the crystal began to hum, resonating with her touch. The runes on its surface pulsed with a rhythmic energy, responding to her presence. It was as if the very structure was alive, recognizing her, calling to her. In that moment, Kaelara understood. The truth of the Titans' legacy was not just in the power they wielded, but in the choices they made. The choices to protect, to create, and yes, even to destroy. She wasn't just the last of her kind, she was the one who would decide whether the Titans would be reborn or forever lost to the annals of history. And that choice, the weight of it, was now in her hands. As Kaelara's fingers continued to trace the glowing symbols on the crystal, the hum in the air intensified. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls were aware of the magnitude of what was unfolding. Elias stood silently beside her, watching in awe as the ancient energy reacted to Kaelara's touch. The crystal was more than just an artifact, it was the heart of the Titans, and she was the one who had been called to awaken it. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of their discovery settling heavily between them. What Kaelara had feared most was now happening. The power her people had once wielded, the power that had both made them gods and led to their downfall, was awakening. It was no longer a relic or a memory, it was alive, pulsing with the potential to change everything. Kaelara, Elias whispered, his voice filled with both awe and concern, what do we do now? You've activated it? This isn't just knowledge. It's a force. Kaelara turned to him, her expression a mix of determination and uncertainty. I don't know. I didn't think it would happen like this. I was hoping for answers, but instead, I've awakened something beyond our understanding. Her gaze shifted back to the crystal, the runes now glowing brightly, almost as if they were alive, responding to her presence. There was a hum of energy in the air, a vibration that resonated deep within her chest. It was calling to her, urging her to delve deeper, to unlock the secrets of her people's past. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, and the walls of the chamber shifted, revealing a hidden passageway that hadn't been there moments before. Kaelara stepped forward instinctively, her eyes narrowing with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Elias followed her, the sound of his boots echoing against the stone as they entered the newly revealed space. The passage led to a vast underground sanctuary, one that looked as though it had been untouched for millennia. Massive statues of Titans loomed over them, their faces serene yet powerful, frozen in time. But it wasn't the statues that captured Kaelara's attention, it was the massive pods lining the walls, each one glowing faintly, as if they held something alive within them. What are these? Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper, as he approached one of the pods. Kaelara stepped forward, her fingers grazing the surface of one of the pods. They were preserved, she said quietly. Not all of my people died, Elias. Some of them, they chose to sleep. They sealed themselves away, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Elias's eyes widened in shock. You mean to say, these Titans are alive? Kaelara nodded, her hand resting on the pod. Yes. They are the last of the Titans, preserved in stasis. Guardians of our legacy. And now, they will awaken. The air around them crackled with energy, the ground beneath their feet shaking more violently now. The pods began to hum, their lights growing brighter as the dormant Titans inside stirred, responding to Kaelara's presence. It was a moment of realization for both her and Elias, this was what the ancient crystal had meant by awakening. It wasn't just knowledge that had been unlocked, it was the return of her people, the Titans, in a way no one could have imagined. Kaelara, Elias said, his voice trembling slightly, this is unbelievable. You're bringing them back. You're bringing your people back. Kaelara's eyes filled with a mixture of awe and dread. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected the ancient Titans to return. The weight of her people's fate, their survival, was now on her shoulders. She wasn't just the last of the Titans anymore, she was the one who had to lead them back into the galaxy, into a universe that had long forgotten their power. What will happen when they wake? Elias asked, his voice full of concern. Will they remember what happened? The destruction, the fall. Kaelara hesitated, her mind racing. I don't know. I don't know what they will remember. I don't know what I will remember. But I have to lead them, Elias. I have to help them rebuild. Suddenly, the first pod opened with a deafening crack, and a towering figure emerged from it. The Titan, a woman, her skin shimmering with the same violet hue as Kaelara's, stepped forward, her massive form causing the ground to tremble beneath her. Her eyes, glowing faintly, focused on Kaelara, and a slow, eerie smile spread across her face. You have awakened us, Kaelara, the Titan's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, filling the chamber. You are our savior, our hope. We were sealed away to protect the galaxy from the power we once held. But now, the time has come. We will rise again. Kaelara stepped back slightly, overwhelmed by the sight of the Titan before her. You remember. The Titan's gaze softened, and she nodded. We remember everything. The fall of our people. The mistakes we made. But we also remember our purpose, to protect, to create, and to lead. We were never meant to vanish into myth. We were meant to rise again. Elias stood silently, taking in the scene before him. The realization hit him hard, Kaelara's people weren't gone. They had chosen to be hidden, to sleep, to protect what was left of their power. And now, they were waking up to a universe that had moved on without them. We will need time, Kaelara said, her voice resolute as she faced the newly awakened Titan. But we have a chance. We have the power to rebuild. We can help the galaxy understand that the Titans are not monsters, but guardians. We can be the bridge between the past and the future. The Titan bowed her head, acknowledging Kaelara's words. We will follow you, Kaelara. We are your people. We will rise together. As more pods opened and more Titans emerged, Kaelara's heart swelled with a mix of fear and hope. The Titans were returning, but this time, they wouldn't be the conquerors of the stars. They wouldn't rise as gods, but as guardians, ready to fight for the balance that had been lost. Her destiny had always been tied to her people, but now it was clearer than ever, Kaelara was not just the last of her kind. She was the one who would lead the Titans back into the galaxy, not as monsters, but as the protectors they were meant to be. Together, they would face the challenges ahead and rebuild what had been lost, and this time, they would do it right. With the Titans now awake and standing by Kaelara, the weight of her newfound responsibility settled heavily upon her. The sleeping gods were no longer a myth. They were real, alive, and looking to her for guidance. This wasn't just a moment of triumph, it was a turning point, a defining moment in her journey to lead the last of her kind. Yet, as the Titans began to gather around her, a new truth began to emerge: the Titans could no longer stand alone. Elias, always by her side, had witnessed this incredible transformation. He had seen Kaelara's evolution from a prisoner of her past to a leader of a new future. And now, as the Titans stirred to life, it became clear that the universe was no longer the place it had been. The Titans and humans, though vastly different in size, power, and history, had one thing in common: a shared will to survive and thrive. Together, they could forge a path to a new future, but it was not going to be easy. I never imagined this day would come, Elias said, standing beside Kaelara, his eyes still wide from the spectacle they had witnessed. I always thought the Titans were just legends. Stories told around campfires. Kaelara turned to him, her gaze full of quiet determination. And now we are no longer legends. But stories are how the future is shaped. The future we build will be written by us, Elias, by the actions we take now. He looked back at her, understanding the gravity of what she meant. What happens now? The galaxy. It's going to change. It won't be ready for the return of the Titans. You're right, Kaelara replied. The galaxy has changed. But so have we. The Titans can't return as rulers. We were once gods, yes. But that was a mistake. We can't take back what's been lost, but we can guide the future, with wisdom, not power. As they continued to discuss their next steps, the other Titans began to move toward them. The Titans were still adjusting to their reawakening, their colossal forms towering over Kaelara and Elias. They were both intimidating and awe-inspiring, but there was a humility in their eyes that Kaelara had never expected. One of the older Titans, a woman with silver tattoos etched into her skin, stepped forward. Her eyes locked with Kaelara's, filled with both respect and caution. Kaelara, the Titan's deep voice rumbled, we are ready to follow you, but we need to know, what do we stand for now? What is our place in this galaxy that we've been absent from for so long? Kaelara stepped forward, meeting the Titan's gaze with a calm resolve. We stand for the future. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. We have the power to protect, to teach, and to heal. Our strength lies not in ruling, but in guiding. The older Titan's gaze softened, and she nodded. A protector, not a ruler. This is a new path, Kaelara. But we will follow you. She turned to the others, raising her voice so that all the Titans could hear. We are the Titans of old, but we are not bound by the mistakes of the past. We will build a new legacy. Kaelara's heart swelled with pride. She had not expected such understanding from her people, people who had once seen themselves as above all others. But these Titans were different. They had learned, as she had, that true strength lay not in domination, but in unity. Elias watched the exchange quietly, understanding the weight of Kaelara's words. He had seen her transform from the last of her kind, weighed down by her people's mistakes, to a leader capable of uniting them with the future. But this wasn't just about the Titans. It was about humans and Titans working together, facing a universe that was unprepared for their return. What about the humans? Elias asked, his voice uncertain. Will they be ready for this? The galaxy. The humans may not be as welcoming as we'd like them to be. Kaelara paused, considering the question. She had never truly thought about the reception they would receive. She had always seen the Titans as a force of nature, unstoppable and powerful. But Elias was right. Humans, like the rest of the galaxy, would see them as threats. And she couldn't afford to be seen as a threat. We need to show them that we are not their enemies, Elias, Kaelara said firmly. We need to build alliances. Not by force, but by showing them that we understand what they need. Together, we can create a new future. A future where Titans and humans are allies, not adversaries. Elias raised an eyebrow, his thoughts turning to the struggles of his own people. It won't be easy. Humans, we're afraid of the unknown. We've seen what happens when civilizations think they are superior. Kaelara nodded, understanding the gravity of Elias's words. Then we'll prove to them that we are worthy of their trust. We need to show them we are here to help, not to dominate. Her words resonated deeply with the other Titans. They had seen the consequences of their former arrogance. They had been the ones to start wars, to oppress others in their pursuit of glory. But now, they could feel the change in the air. They weren't just titans anymore, they were guardians, protectors of the galaxy they had once ruled. The group began to discuss their next steps in earnest, strategizing how they would approach the human factions that still ruled the galaxy. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be simple. They would have to prove themselves to be more than the giants of legend. One titan, a younger male with glowing red markings on his skin, stepped forward. "What of the other factions?" he asked. "What about the ones who would seek to use our return for their own ends?" Elias's gaze grew harder, his military training kicking in. "The Consortium, the rebels, they won't just accept us with open arms. Some of them will see us as weapons to be controlled. We'll have to be strategic." Kaelara turned to Elias, her eyes filled with determination. "And that's why we need you, the humans. You know this galaxy better than any titan. We will need your guidance." Elias met her gaze and nodded slowly. "I've seen what your people are capable of. I've seen the power that lies within the titans, and now I see what you can become, Kaelara. Together, we can make this work. But we need to be patient. We need to show them that our unity, our strength, isn't something to be feared, it's something to be respected." Kaelara smiled, the weight of leadership still heavy on her shoulders but lightened by the support of Elias and her people. "Then we will move forward, together. As allies, as guardians, and as the future of the galaxy." As the Titans and humans began to map out their path forward, they all knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. But they also knew one thing: together, they could overcome anything. The Titans, once isolated and feared, were now united with the humans, and together, they would shape a future none could have predicted. The galaxy was about to experience the dawn of a new era. And it would be led by the most unlikely of allies. As Kaelara and Elias moved forward with their plan to unite humans and titans, there was a quiet storm brewing on the horizon. They had begun to forge alliances, speaking with other factions, offering their strength as protectors and builders, not rulers. Yet, even as they navigated the intricacies of diplomacy and trust, something dark and dangerous lurked in the shadows: the Consortium. The Consortium had been a constant force in the galaxy, a powerful political and economic organization that held influence over countless systems. Their reach was vast, their motives often veiled in secrecy, and their goals rarely transparent. Despite the strides that Kaelara and Elias were making in their mission to unite, the Consortium had already begun to take notice of the Titans' return. Elias had been suspicious from the start. Their initial meetings with various factions had been too smooth, too welcoming. There had to be something beneath the surface, something that didn't feel right. Kaelara had felt it too. The more they worked to establish their presence in the galaxy, the more they realized the Consortium wasn't as passive as it seemed. Their intentions were far from clear. Late one night, after a long day of strategic meetings and preparations, Elias stood in the ship's cockpit, staring out into the endless expanse of stars. His mind raced. Kaelara had noticed it, too. The sudden interest the Consortium had shown, the undercurrents of fear and curiosity surrounding their return. He couldn't shake the feeling that their newfound alliance with the humans and Titans was drawing unwanted attention, and the Consortium was no friend. Kaelara entered the cockpit, her tall figure casting a long shadow across the room. Her violet eyes, once full of the weight of her people's loss, now burned with a new kind of fire, one that matched Elias's resolve. She had become more than just a leader, she had become a symbol of hope, and that was a symbol the Consortium would not allow to thrive unchallenged. "Elias," Kaelara said, her voice steady, "I sense it too. Something's wrong. They're watching us. The Consortium has always been about control, and now they see the rise of the Titans as a threat." Elias nodded, his gaze never leaving the stars. "They've always had a hand in everything, the politics, the economy, the wars. They control the flow of power in this galaxy. And they don't like losing control." He turned to face her, his expression hardening. "We've made ourselves too visible. And now they'll come for us. They won't tolerate the return of the Titans." Kaelara clenched her fists, the weight of her people's destiny hanging heavily on her. "They think they can stop us," she said quietly, "but they have no idea who we really are." Elias met her gaze, his voice low but resolute. "We're about to find out what kind of game they're really playing." It wasn't long before their suspicions were confirmed. A series of covert communications intercepted by Elias's intelligence team revealed unsettling truths. The Consortium had been tracking their every move, manipulating information, and sowing doubt among the factions they were trying to unite. They had been playing the long game, subtly undermining Kaelara and Elias's efforts to build trust with the galaxy. "They're behind the rumors," Elias murmured as he sifted through the intercepted messages. "They've been spreading lies about the Titans' intentions, painting you as a threat to galactic peace, Kaelara." Kaelara's anger flared, but she quickly quelled it. "They're trying to turn us into monsters once again. They fear what we represent, the change we bring, the possibility that the Titans might actually stand for something different this time." The walls of the cockpit seemed to close in on them as the weight of the revelation settled in. The Consortium had a vested interest in keeping the galaxy fractured, in maintaining the status quo. If they allowed Kaelara and the Titans to succeed, they risked losing their stranglehold on power. Elias, always pragmatic, turned to face her. "We need to be careful. If we move too fast, they'll label us as rebels, extremists. We can't just show up at their doorstep and demand answers. We need leverage. We need a way to get under their skin." Kaelara's mind raced as she processed his words. The Consortium was too large, too powerful to confront head-on without consequences. They couldn't afford to rush into battle. But there was one thing the Consortium had overlooked in their calculation: they had underestimated the resolve of the Titans. "We play their game, but on our terms," Kaelara said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "We gather information, find the truth they've been hiding, and expose it. If they want to play dirty, then we'll play too. But we do it together." Elias gave her a small nod. "I'll start gathering more intel. We need to understand their entire operation. The Consortium doesn't operate in the open, so we'll have to dig deeper." Kaelara's eyes softened slightly, her confidence in Elias unwavering. "And I'll speak with our allies. We need to unite the factions who are still on our side, prepare them for the fight ahead." As Elias turned to leave the cockpit, Kaelara stayed behind for a moment, her thoughts drifting. The road ahead was no longer just about uniting the Titans and humans. It was about fighting a system that had manipulated the galaxy for so long, a system that had ensured its own survival by keeping the truth buried. Kaelara knew the galaxy wouldn't welcome the Titans back with open arms. But she also knew that they had the power to reshape that galaxy. If only they could expose the lies the Consortium had been hiding. Days passed, and the tension only grew as Elias and Kaelara worked tirelessly to uncover more about the Consortium's operations. Through covert operations and intelligence gathered from their allies, they began to uncover a deeper, darker conspiracy than they could have imagined. The Consortium wasn't just a political force, it was a shadow government that had been manipulating the galaxy's resources, controlling entire star systems for centuries, all while masking their true intentions behind a veneer of diplomacy and progress. They're not just trying to control the galaxy, Kaelara. They're trying to own it, Elias said one evening, his voice low with the weight of his discovery. The Consortium has been buying up planets, blackmailing governments, and suppressing any resistance. They don't care about peace or order. They care about one thing: absolute power. Kaelara clenched her fists, the anger she had buried long ago now rising to the surface. And they've been using us, the Titans, as a scapegoat. They've been spreading lies, turning entire civilizations against us to cover their tracks. We've been their fall guy for centuries. Elias nodded. But not anymore. Now, we have the truth. And that truth is the weapon we need to fight back. Kaelara's resolve hardened as she looked at the stars through the viewport. She had spent too long in the shadows, too long running from her people's past. Now, the Titans would rise, not as conquerors, but as warriors of truth, and they would face the Consortium, not as monsters, but as allies to those who had been oppressed for too long. The fight for the future was only just beginning. The days following the discovery of the Consortium's deception and the rise of the Titans were filled with urgency. Kaelara stood at the helm of a growing movement, uniting the forces of humans and Titans, but as the weight of leadership settled deeper upon her, a storm began to brew inside. Kaelara's internal struggle was not just about confronting external enemies like the Consortium, it was about embracing her destiny. Her people had fallen because of their arrogance, and now she had the responsibility to rise from the ashes of that destruction. But was she ready to be the leader they needed? Or was she destined to repeat the same mistakes? Elias had been by her side every step of the way. He had seen her transformation from the last of the Titans into a woman with the power to shape the future. Yet, he could see the growing uncertainty in her eyes, a hesitation that had taken root. She had already carried the burden of the past, but now she was carrying the weight of an entire civilization's future. It was a burden few could bear. One night, after the others had retired to their quarters, Kaelara stood alone on the observation deck of their ship. The stars stretched endlessly before her, their cold light a stark contrast to the warmth that burned within her chest. She had once believed that power and strength were the only things that mattered. But now, as she gazed out at the vastness of the galaxy, she saw the truth. Leadership wasn't about power. It was about sacrifice, understanding, and the willingness to let go of the past. "I've led before," she murmured to herself. "I led my people into glory, and I led them into ruin." The words echoed in the silent room, a haunting reminder of the responsibility that weighed heavily on her shoulders. For the first time in years, Kaelara allowed herself to feel the full extent of her doubt. Could she truly be the one to change the course of her people's history? Or was she destined to repeat the cycle of arrogance and destruction that had marked the fall of the Titans? Elias entered the room quietly, sensing the turmoil within her. He had always been perceptive, but tonight, he could feel the emptiness in the air as if the very stars outside were reflecting her doubts. "You're not alone in this, Kaelara," he said softly, his voice steady, but tinged with understanding. "You never have been." Kaelara turned toward him, her gaze intense, though tinged with vulnerability. "I don't know if I can do this, Elias. I've watched my people fall because of their pride, because we thought we were invincible. Now, I'm supposed to lead them into a new age. But what if I'm just like them? What if I'm just going to bring us all down again? Elias stepped forward, closing the distance between them. No, Kaelara. You are not the same. The Titans of the past were consumed by their own desire for power. But you've learned from that. You understand the cost of arrogance. You don't just carry the legacy of your people, you carry the lessons of their mistakes. She closed her eyes, letting his words settle in her mind. They were true, she knew that. But the fear still lingered, like a dark cloud in the back of her mind. And what if the lesson is that I'm not meant to lead? Kaelara asked, her voice breaking slightly. What if I'm just not strong enough? What if my people need someone who is more, someone who hasn't lost everything, who hasn't been broken by the weight of the past? Elias looked at her, his expression unwavering. Then let me remind you of something, Kaelara. You're not here because you're perfect. You're here because you're alive. You're here because you have the strength to face the mistakes of your past and move beyond them. That's what makes you a leader, not your perfection, but your ability to rise. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at him. Elias had always been a source of strength for her, but in that moment, his words resonated with more power than she could have anticipated. She had spent so much time running from the ghosts of her past, from the mistakes of the Titans, that she had forgotten one crucial thing: she was more than her history. Kaelara stepped away from the window, walking toward the center of the room, her mind spinning with the weight of everything they had discovered: the Titans' return, the Consortium's treachery, and the responsibility she now carried. She had been afraid of becoming what her people had once been, but Elias was right. Her past didn't define her. Her actions, her choices, and her ability to forgive herself for what had happened, those were the things that would define her. I've been afraid to take the mantle, Elias, she admitted, her voice soft but resolute. Afraid to face the future because I didn't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. But I can't run from it anymore. I can't let fear hold me back. Elias's eyes softened as he listened to her. He had seen the weight of her burden, the internal conflict that gnawed at her every step. But in this moment, he saw the resolve begin to return to her, slowly, but surely. You've already taken the first step, he said, his voice full of warmth. You're facing the fear, the doubt, and you're letting it guide you, not control you. That's what makes you a leader. And that's why you will lead us to something better. Kaelara looked at him, her expression softening. I can't do this alone, Elias. I know I've always carried the weight of my people's future, but I can't do it by myself anymore. I need the Titans, and I need the humans. I need you. Elias smiled, stepping closer to her. You don't have to do it alone, Kaelara. You have all of us. We'll do this together. She nodded, her heart swelling with the realization that she wasn't carrying the burden of her people's future by herself. There were those who stood beside her, humans and Titans alike, ready to face the unknown and fight for a future that had once seemed impossible. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the struggle would be long. But in that moment, Kaelara understood something deeper than before. She wasn't just the last of the Titans. She was the one who would break the cycle, who would rebuild her people, and in doing so, rebuild the galaxy. And this time, she would do it with a heart open to change, not bound by the past. In the aftermath of Kaelara's revelation and her acceptance of the mantle of leadership, the weight of her people's future grew heavier. The discovery of the Titan's sealed fate had marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that carried the promise of resurrection, but also the fear of the unknown. Kaelara had embraced her destiny, her fears now balanced with the strength to carry her people forward. But as the newly awakened Titans began to gather and strategize, a new, unforeseen revelation shook the foundations of everything Kaelara had hoped for. The message came in a transmission, one that Elias intercepted as he was scanning through the encrypted networks for more intelligence on the Consortium. The usual channels were quiet, but this message, unmarked, anonymous, and full of urgency, cut through the silence like a blade. The source was untraceable, and the contents, startling. "Kaelara," Elias said, his voice tinged with something between shock and confusion as he entered the command center. "You need to see this." Kaelara looked up from her desk, the faintest hint of curiosity mixed with the constant weight of responsibility. She rose and walked over to Elias, her gaze sharp. "What is it?" He played the transmission, and as the screen flickered to life, a voice came through, deep, resonant, and unmistakably Titan. The figure that appeared on the screen was shrouded in shadow, a silhouette of a Titan, far larger and more imposing than even Kaelara's own form. "I am not the last," the figure spoke, its voice carrying an ancient weight. "There are others. Hidden. You have been misled. The Titans you have awakened are not the only ones. There are still more of us out there, waiting in the corners of the galaxy. And your awakening has set in motion forces that neither you nor the Consortium can control." Kaelara stood frozen, her mind racing. This wasn't just a message, it was a warning. Elias turned to her, his face pale. Who was that?" "I don't know," Kaelara whispered, her voice barely audible as her mind processed the gravity of the situation. "But they're right. We believed we were the last. The last Titans, the last remnants of a once great civilization. But there's more? Hidden." As the message concluded, the screen flickered again, but this time, the figure did not reappear. Only static remained. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, suffocating in its enormity. For the first time since they had arrived in the ruins, Kaelara felt a sense of real uncertainty, the kind that comes with unanswered questions. "What does this mean?" Elias asked, his voice low, but filled with concern. "If there are more Titans out there, what do they want? And why haven't they come forward?" Kaelara's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the implications. "I don't know. But if what this message says is true, then we're not the only ones carrying the weight of the past. We've awoken a sleeping giant." The word giant hung between them like an unspoken truth. The Titans, once legends, now felt more like a force that could reshape the galaxy, for better or for worse. Kaelara's instinct told her that this was not a coincidence. Their return, the resurgence of the Titans, was no accident. "We need to find them," Kaelara said, her voice hardening with resolve. "These Titans, they've been hidden for a reason. And if we want to build the future we promised, we need to know what they want." Elias nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "But what if they don't want to be found? What if they've been hiding from something, or someone, more dangerous than us?" Kaelara paused, the weight of his words sinking in. What if this message, this unknown Titan, was a warning not just to her, but to everyone? What if the Titans had hidden themselves away for a reason, because the galaxy wasn't ready for their return? "I won't run from the truth," she said, her voice firm. "If we're going to move forward, we have to know everything. No more secrets. We'll find them, Elias. And we'll bring them back, but we do it on our terms." The hours stretched on as Kaelara and Elias worked through the next steps, strategizing how to trace the signal, how to track down the source of the mysterious transmission. As they worked, the uncertainty that had gripped Kaelara only deepened. She had always believed that the Titans were the key to her people's redemption. But what if they were only the beginning of something much larger, something that could threaten the fragile peace they were trying to build? Later that night, as Kaelara stood by the viewport once more, the weight of the revelation hung over her like an unshakable shadow. She had come to the ruins, expecting answers. She had come to find hope, to lead her people back to their rightful place in the galaxy. But now, everything had changed. The fate of the Titans was no longer in her hands alone. "Elias," she said softly, not turning to face him. "If there are others out there, others who've been hidden away, just like us, then we can't face this alone. We need allies. We need a strategy. If we're to unite the Titans and the humans, we need to know what we're truly up against." Elias stepped beside her, his gaze lingering on the stars. "I agree. And we can't afford to wait for these unknown Titans to show themselves. We need to make the first move. If we show them we're not afraid of the unknown, they'll see us as allies. But we'll have to be careful. If they've been hidden for this long, they might not be as welcoming as we hope." Kaelara looked out at the galaxy, feeling the weight of the unknown stretching before them. She had never imagined that the path forward would be this treacherous. But she knew one thing: she couldn't turn back now. The fate of the Titans, of the galaxy, depended on what she chose to do next. "Let's find them, Elias," she said with a quiet determination, "but we'll do it together. We'll face whatever comes, no matter the cost. We are the future of the Titans, and no one can take that from us." As they turned back to the planning room, the revelation of the lost Titans loomed over them, a new mystery to unravel, and a new threat to confront. What awaited them would change everything once again, but for Kaelara, this time, the truth was the only thing she could trust. The revelation of the hidden Titans, those ancient warriors still scattered across the galaxy, had forever changed Kaelara's path. It had shaken her belief that the Titans' return was the singular event that would bring salvation and healing. Now, with the burden of her people's future weighing even more heavily on her, Kaelara understood the gravity of the challenge she faced. Not only did she have to lead the Titans back to prominence, but she also had to figure out how to rebuild a society that had long been fragmented by pride and the fall of their once great civilization. The days that followed the revelation were filled with decisions that would shape the future of the Titans, the humans, and the galaxy itself. Kaelara knew that the Titans couldn't simply return to power as conquerors. Their history had been defined by arrogance and destruction, but she was determined to rewrite that history, to make the Titans' return a symbol of healing, not tyranny. Standing in the central command room of the ship, Kaelara reviewed the data Elias had gathered on the Consortium's movements and the locations of the remaining Titans. The threat was still there, hidden, calculating, but Kaelara wasn't going to let fear dictate her future. Rebuilding the Titans' legacy meant dismantling the broken aspects of their past. It meant learning, evolving, and showing the galaxy that strength could exist in unity rather than dominance. "How long do you think it'll take for the rest of the Titans to join us?" Elias asked, his voice low as he studied the map of the galaxy on the screen in front of him. Kaelara's gaze hardened as she studied the coordinates. "I don't know. They're scattered, hidden away. And we can't simply call them. Some have been in isolation for millennia, away from the chaos and destruction we caused. I don't know if they'll even trust us." Her voice faltered slightly, the weight of uncertainty creeping into her words. Elias stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Trust is earned, Kaelara. You've already shown them something they never expected: leadership. You've made it clear that you're not just the last of your people. You're a different kind of leader, one who understands what it means to move forward, not dwell on the past. That's what they need to see. Kaelara looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and fear. She knew he was right. The Titans had to see that their redemption wasn't a return to their glory days but a chance to rise as something greater. Something better. But what if they don't come? She asked, her voice quieter now, as the uncertainty lingered. What if they fear us or see us as weak, as we've always been seen? What if they still believe that the only way forward is through power? Elias didn't hesitate. Then we'll show them. You'll show them. You're not just leading the Titans. You're leading everyone. You're leading humanity and every other faction that's willing to listen to the truth, that strength lies in unity, in building something that lasts. Kaelara took a deep breath, steeling herself for the long road ahead. The universe had grown complacent in its belief that the Titans had been wiped out, that their era was over. But Kaelara understood now that the Titans' legacy wasn't just about power, it was about redemption, about forging a path that would heal and rebuild. The past had shaped them, but it wouldn't define their future. We can't do this alone, she said finally, turning back to the console. But if we can unite the Titans and the humans, if we can show the galaxy that we are capable of living side by side, then we will change everything. It will be a new era, one where strength isn't about ruling, but about leading with wisdom and compassion. The hum of the ship's engines filled the room as Elias nodded in agreement. Then let's make sure the galaxy knows who we are. We'll gather allies. We'll prove to them that the Titans aren't just a relic of the past, but a beacon for the future. With that, Kaelara set the coordinates for the next phase of their mission. The next step wasn't just about finding the remaining Titans, it was about forging alliances, showing the galaxy that there was a new path for the future, one built on redemption, compassion, and strength through unity. Weeks passed as Kaelara and Elias continued their efforts to reach out to the other factions, both human and Titan. It was slow, painstaking work. There were so many voices of doubt and fear, and many still saw the return of the Titans as a threat. But Kaelara pressed on, her conviction unwavering. Her people needed to understand that their return wasn't about resurrecting the past, it was about rebuilding a future they could be proud of. One evening, as Kaelara prepared for another diplomatic meeting with the leaders of several star systems, Elias approached her, his face lit by the soft glow of the command console. I've received word from the Titan faction on Caladan, he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. They're willing to meet with us. They're coming. Kaelara's heart skipped a beat. Are you sure? After everything, are they truly coming to meet us? Elias nodded. They are. They understand now what you represent, Kaelara. And they want to help rebuild. They don't want to be feared, they want to be understood. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, a sense of hope blossomed in Kaelara's chest. This was the beginning of the rebuilding she had dreamed of. It wasn't just about the Titans, it was about healing the galaxy that had been torn apart by their mistakes. It was about offering redemption, not only for her people but for the galaxy itself. As the days passed, more and more factions began to join the cause. The remaining Titans came forward, not as conquerors, but as partners, willing to fight for a future where strength was used to protect, not dominate. The humans came, too, hesitant at first, but slowly, they began to see that Kaelara's vision wasn't a return to the past. It was a future that they could build together, a future that included everyone. On the day the final meeting took place, Kaelara stood before the representatives of the humans, the remaining Titans, and other allied factions. The room was filled with tension, but it was also filled with hope that they could truly rebuild, that they could unite to create something that would endure. Kaelara spoke, her voice steady and strong. "We are not here to rule. We are not here to dominate. We are here to build. Together, we will forge a future where the mistakes of the past are not forgotten, but learned from. We are here to redeem what was lost, to heal what was broken, and to create something that will last for generations." As she finished, a soft murmur of agreement rippled through the room. For the first time in centuries, the Titans were not seen as a threat. They were seen as partners. And this new era, this new beginning, was one that would shape the galaxy forever. But Kaelara knew that their journey had only just begun. The road to redemption was long, and the future was uncertain. Yet in that moment, standing at the threshold of a new era, Kaelara felt a sense of peace settle within her. She was no longer just the last of the Titans. She was their future, their redemption, and with the humans and the Titans united, together, they would build something that had once seemed impossible. A new era,